Hi, everybody. Megan Thompson here with Megan Thompson Coaching, and I've got Jamie and John here to share with you how they broke out of the meltdown cycle. 5 meltdowns a day they were dealing with on a regular basis. And so, guys, go ahead and share with us where, introduce yourselves, speak a little bit about where you were and where you are now.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jamie. We were dealing with, like Megan said, 5 meltdowns a day of varying degrees, but just really struggling back in October when we started this and had been dealing with it for quite some time. And now here we are 6 months later, and we were actually just saying, like, we maybe have 2 to 3 a week on the worst weeks. So we have definitely come a long way in a relatively short period of time. So we are happy to be here and celebrating.
Yeah.
A change that wasn't expected from my point of view, but happy that it has played out the way it has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, John, walk me through that, because that level of skepticism was something we talked about in our first conversation. So, share.
So, of many of the things that I learned throughout this, I am the highly sensitive person myself. I also believe myself to be very structured and rigid in certain ways. So, going into this, it was, well, while we weren't, spankers or physical repercussions, anything, but I'm a firm hand kind of person. I used to be a cop. That's my background. Hey, you're not doing what I tell you to. You're going to do what I tell you to.
Yeah. Make it happen.
I mean, it was definitely a very different change of mindset for me trying to come into this. And it's not, well, it was that I didn't think it was going to work, but it was.
Thank you for your honesty. That's what we want.
My place where I was coming from was, okay, well, if you aren't going to do this, we get stricter in punishments. We, get firmer in whatever it's going to be, because that's just what makes sense to me. But, working through this, it kind of was, I think within the first week, just seeing that initial, okay, just in acknowledgement of, I understand that you're having trouble with this, any of those pieces, and seeing the immediate reaction of how he was reacting to that really set up, okay, well, yeah, this probably is something here that will make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll believe it when I see it. Yeah. And you still made the decision, right? So let's talk about a little bit about that for both of you, in the sense that, you've got 2 twin 7-year-olds, right? When we met, and, 2 twin, I guess I just, you guys get that all the time, probably. Twin 7-year-olds. Yeah. One's highly sensitive, one isn't, right? And, and those 5 meltdowns a day were just from your son, right? In the sense that big dichotomy. And so it makes sense for you, John, to be like, how do I know that anything is going to, that what I'm doing, these traditional parenting strategies aren't effective, because my daughter is responding to it, if you will, right?
Yep.
So
yeah, I was definitely of the mindset of, you're just doing this to get a rise or any of that kind of stuff because it works for her. What's wrong?
Jamie, I want you to talk about that too. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, one of the biggest things that stuck with me very early on, you said, he's not giving you a hard time, he's having a hard time. And so I really had to accept that and kind of go from there.
Yeah.
I was not as skeptical as John. I'm not a skeptical person in that same way. I randomly saw an ad for you on Facebook and signed up for your emails and started reading your emails and watching your little videos, and everyone that would come in, I was like, this is him. We need to do this. Every time one would come in, I would forward it to John, read this. This is Rowan.
Yes.
So
I see your nod, John. It's subtle, but there's something going on here.
Not lying.
So when let's speak a little bit more about the problem. Before you found me, what were you guys dealing with on a daily basis? Meltdowns can be, a relative description, right? So walk me through, where was your son struggling, and what was that experience like for you as parents?
I mean, it could be something as simple as getting to school in the morning before, pre-pandemic. I would get them up, get dressed, brush your teeth, brush your hair, go and eat breakfast, let's pack your backpack and be ready to go. And now I realize, I can't give him 6 instructions and expect him to go do it. He will take 6 things and he doesn't know where to start. And so instead of picking one and starting there, he just doesn't. So we have to give him go do this, and then he'll do it, and then go do this. And he doesn't want to do that. Well, you can do this first instead, but you're going to do everything. And just giving him a little bit of the autonomy to decide, what does he do first, but with more limited options, I guess. Yeah. Has really helped. And so that was first thing in the morning, that's how our day would start every day. It was, we have to get out the house at this time to get down the driveway to the bus and not miss the bus. And it was a struggle every day. Yeah. So that was off the bat, we were at 1 a day
right.
from that.
Right.
And, like I said earlier, not to say that we're perfect. Not every morning is perfect. Not every morning is smooth, but they're definitely more, there are more better mornings, and the mornings that aren't better are still more smooth than they were a year ago. Exactly.
So knowing that for you guys with your son's behavior, what was he doing when he was melting down? Was it hitting, kicking, what? Just for the audience to be clear.
Hitting, kicking, falling to the floor, screaming, throwing things.
The falling over and collapsing and giving up on everything was the stuff that would drive me crazy. The screaming. He was never really terribly violent or anything, at least as far as I remember anyway. But I mean, there were definitely times where he would hit his sister and go down that route, and then we'd get into the arguments, and he would just flat lie. I didn't hit her. You did.
Right. And so a lot of overwhelm going on just from the beginning of the day, right? And so for you guys as parents, by the end of the day, what were you doing to manage all of it? We spoke.
Waiting for bedtime every day. I was like, all right, 3 hours till bedtime.
Counting down.
And I remember when they were really young, somebody told me appreciate the days, because the days feel long, but the years go by really fast. And now we're here, they're 8, and I totally tell people the same thing. When they're screaming, crying all night long and keeping you up, and you just want to get through that stage, don't wish it away. And I was definitely at that point, just wishing every day, just get us through this day. Maybe tomorrow will be better. And it wasn't.
Yeah. But that's common for, as you know, meeting other parents who are dealing with the same thing that you were, right?
Oh, yeah.
That just looking at the clock, okay, can we get over, this is a symptom of the meltdown cycle. This isn't parenting. This isn't a symptom of parenting, right? It's a symptom of the meltdown cycle. And so for you guys at this point, why was it so important for you to fix this problem at that point? Rather than just waiting until they grew out of it, because you were hearing all these people to just appreciate the days, right?
Right.
I think it was,
I'll let John go first.
Without letting it get, before it got worse. I mean, I know there were 1 or 2 times, or it might have been more, I don't know. But I know there were times where he would have his meltdowns. He's the worst kid ever. He can't do anything right. And he got to the, I just don't want to be here anymore. And those just killed Jamie. He had a real hard time, and not that I didn't, but I also listen, don't care. So it's, we saw that happening and didn't want it to be where this becomes his daily thing, or God forbid he actually try and do something. I don't know.
Yeah. Right. So acting.
We also, we live really close to family members. My sister-in-law's next door. My mother-in-law's down the street. And I wanted to be able to say, yeah, go over there.
Yeah.
And we had gotten to a point where they would ask you to go over and I would find any excuse not to let them. And, that wasn't fair to his sister either.
Right.
But it was, I don't want to put that on them to have to deal with. If he were to get into that, cycle, and none of us knew how to deal with it, but we were at least used to it almost. We started to just kind of look past it and ignore it, and like I said earlier, hope that it went away. And they weren't there. So when it would happen with them, it definitely, opened my eyes. It happened with my mom when they were visiting last summer, and she took them to her house for 2 weeks, and she would call me like, what, this is so much worse than last year. What has been going on? It's like, honestly, I have no idea. And throughout this whole last 6 months, every time I get on the phone with my mom, I'm like, Mom, listen to what happened. This is what we did, and this is how it worked. And she's been a huge cheerleader for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Completely different dynamic, right? Feeling backed into a corner with no respite because of that guilt and fear, right? The fear of how your relatives will care for him, but also how he'll respond and relate to them, and the guilt around, I don't want to put that on my relatives. And so it keeps you stuck, it keeps you trapped in your own home. On top of the fact that there's a pandemic, right? So I can't imagine that you were sleeping well or responding calmly to your kiddo when you were struggling with that as well, just knowing that. So
the pandemic definitely heightened everything, I think. We were around each other 24/7, and we didn't have any way to escape. I couldn't escape and go to work. I couldn't escape and go. We all do Taekwondo, and we couldn't go to our Taekwondo classes and get out my aggression on a punching bag. It was definitely a factor in what made it devolve into the level that it was, and why we looked for something to improve the situation.
So you mentioned earlier that you found me, you found us through the Facebook ad. With that being said, what did you try before, right? So we already heard from you, John, just my way or the highway. Come on. Even if you're struggling, it's not going to, you still need the objective to be met, right? So being outcome oriented as a parent, and that leading to using traditional strategies. But what else? Because I know there was a big dichotomy for you two when we first met on the phone of having differing perspectives of what was going to work, right? So what else were you trying?
Everything.
So we were definitely the good cop, bad cop, right? John was
literally
predominantly bad cop, and I was predominantly good cop. So when John would say my way or the highway, they would come running to me, and I might give in. So, definitely just the traditional parenting, the stuff that we grew up with. Like John said earlier, we are not spankers. We don't use corporal punishment really in any way, but it's you are crying on the floor because you don't want to brush your teeth, then you don't get to do anything fun for the rest of the day.
Right.
Or the threats of taking something away or whatever. But I will admit that I am a little bit more soft in that way, and I might not follow through, which is definitely not the best thing for either kid, but specifically for Rowan. But in regards to the natural consequences, having that follow through versus, having something completely unrelated being associated with a punishment just doesn't connect the dots for him.
We would do the go to your room, nothing fun, any of that. But then she would give in 5 minutes later, and that would drive me insane too. And it's he's never going to learn when you don't actually punish him for anything. But it was that strict mindset of he needs to be punished. He's not doing what he's supposed to do.
Right.
I mean, she had also found, whatever books online, how to treat your anxiety child, how to listen to your child, how to whatever. And she would send me all of them, and I would or wouldn't read them. And then she found this.
So what?
Actually, I have a book right here. The last book I bought before we found you.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like trying any book, any book I could find, any online thing that I could find, and nothing would stick.
Right. And so the difference between, because there's some good nuggets in that book. It's not a knock on the book. It's a matter of the like what works, right? What's relevant.
But it wasn't. It never got us to the root of the problem.
Yeah.
It was treating the symptoms instead of treating the actual trait. It was, trying to stop the meltdowns, but not actually knowing why the meltdowns were occurring.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or, he's super smart, but he can't do 6 things if I tell him to do these 6 things. And why not?
Yeah. Right.
Right. So, whereas, like you said earlier, our daughter, they're twins. They're very similar in many ways. Yeah. But if I give her a list of 6 things to do, she goes and does them. And doesn't question and doesn't, get distracted after doing half the first thing.
Right.
Or not being able to even begin.
Yeah. So what about that approach? Slowing down, shifting, understanding from the root. In terms of some of the few things that I taught you at the beginning, guys, what did you notice that you were super skeptical about or that threw you for a loop? And, let's speak about that in that respect. What surprised you when we first got started?
I think how quickly things shifted. From the very first week, just like John mentioned earlier, starting off with just validating it's okay to feel the way you're feeling. And that immediately improved things. Yeah. Within the first week to 2 weeks, we were down to maybe 1 a day, just with that simple change. Right. And that's definitely been the most surprising thing to me throughout the whole thing was how quickly they did reduce. They didn't immediately go away completely, but immediately reduced in the frequency. Yeah. One
of the things for me, I don't remember what week it was because even if I could have told time before the pandemic, I can't anymore. I want to say week 3 or something. No, we got into the way the meltdowns are going to occur is going to change. So rather than 5 a day, you might go down to 1, but there might be larger meltdowns. Frequency will decrease, but intensity will increase, and vice versa. Kind of how we went through this roadmap of you planned it out, and it was exactly what happened. Again, part of my skepticism just going into the whole thing of, was this going to work? And like you said, the validation and acknowledgement made a big difference. And it's like, okay, this is working. And then the intensity went up. It's like, this is okay. What are we doing?
We're just packing it all into one meltdown.
As you continue to go through it, it changed and it was different, but it still was gradual steps getting better over time.
Okay, so what allowed you to override your skepticism, John, to allow that you could feel skeptical and make changes anyways and take action anyways?
I mean, for me, I can be skeptical of something, but it kind of nature of what I've done in my work life, I'll still try whatever. And it's one of those proof is in the pudding kind of things. I can not believe something will work, but I'm quick to adapt and change is at least what I feel about myself. So the fact that we saw results basically immediately was, oh, okay. And then when things seem to get quote unquote worse from an intensity standpoint, but you were calling it out, well, this is what we're going to expect. And here's the next thing you're going to see. And immediately that was the next thing that we saw. It's again, the proof's in the pudding for me kind of a deal. So that's, I can be skeptical, but as long as we're seeing something change, then cool.
I was always impressed by the way, my question of the week, it would be like, oh, that's coming in the next the next video you're going to watch. It was such a natural progression. It would be like, okay, we've done this. Now what about this? And be like, oh, that's next.
Yeah.
And, just building on that over time and seeing the way that it all came together in the end was really just impressive. As the consumer, I guess, because we wanted to see results immediately, but you just kept saying, like, you got to work the program. It's an 8-week program for a reason. Yeah. We're not just going to put everything all into the first week and hope that something sticks. We were tired of the throwing everything at the wall and hoping that something stuck. Yeah. It was, all right, let's do this one thing. All right, that stuck. Let's move on.
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
And when we got several weeks in and we're having a problem, well, make sure you're going back and still doing step 1.
Right. So the difference between throwing things at the wall to see what sticks, right, and the reassurance that following a recipe gives you, and noticing that when you follow a recipe, say, for example, we just use the cake example, right? You put the eggs on the icing, you're going to end up with salmonella. We talk about that all the time, right? It's also true that if you remove the baking soda from your brownies halfway through, your brownies are going to taste like crap, right? And so the systematic incremental changes, as I mentioned, we were talking about a book earlier, like, it's not that stuff in that book isn't relevant. It's that they all need to be compounded upon, right? And so what I'm hearing from you guys, both of you, is that the proof is in the pudding, but it's also in the recipe, in a system. The difference between a tactic and following things to build foundational skills upon each other, right? So for you guys at this point, I want to speak about, if there's anything else that you wanted to add about your experience, or what was it like, I have 2 questions actually, learning alongside other parents as well. We can talk about that too.
I would say the other parents thing was definitely a big help for, I don't remember people's names either, but, some of the husbands, fathers that would be on the calls, and she would look at me and just be like, he's you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pay attention.
we're experiencing the same thing, and we're having the same difficulties dealing with it. And, there was military background fathers on there. It's like, let's get this done in order. What's the deal? That's that strict kind of background. And all, just seeing that you're doing the same things, but you're getting through it together definitely helps.
Right.
You can go.
Yeah. Before all this, we definitely felt on an island.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that I feel like you don't talk about, right? You just try and get through it. You deal with the stares when you're out in public, and when you're at home, you just hope the windows are closed so nobody can hear what's going on.
Yeah.
But getting into the group and hearing, all of us are experiencing this, basically the same thing, just in different scenarios. Realizing that we're not alone. We have these resources that, they might be a few weeks ahead of us, and maybe 3 weeks ago they were dealing with the exact same thing we are, and they have experience in how to move past it. And then now we're the ones saying, oh, well, here's what we did. Yeah. And it definitely helped us get through things that we were struggling with, that you're doing the same thing. And now, like, I'm in a lot of mom groups on Facebook, and I see highly sensitive child descriptions all over the place. So I'm like, have you ever heard about this? Because I didn't know it existed until last summer, and I would have appreciated knowing about it earlier.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to tell you your kid's highly sensitive, because I am not trained in any way to do that. But this sounds like what we were dealing with. So look into this.
Yes. You can't unknow what you know now, right? So noticing, I mean, it speaks to the challenges that we see for parents of sensitive kids, right? Your kid's not broken, right? It's that, even the title of that book, that it implies that there's something wrong and pieces to pick up, right? and to fit the puzzle together. Now, in parenting, you need a puzzle, right? You need to have all the pieces managing and to support your child. However, your child is not shattered. Your child is not in pieces. He just needs help in learning the skills to support himself in staying and staying calm and managing that and feeling good about himself. So I want to speak about that too, because when we first got started, 5 meltdowns a day, that's 35 meltdowns a week, right? On max end, right? And then we're moving to on a really tough week, 2, 3 in a week, right? So I'm not going to do the math on that level of reduction, but as you were saying, the first couple of weeks you saw 1 a day. That's an 80% reduction. I can do that kind of math in my head. And so just noticing that 6 months out, and as you use that word, John, the proof is in the pudding. You can't lie. Data doesn't lie, right? With that being said, when we think about how your child feels, what has to happen for him to keep his body in control, to keep his mind in control, to keep his heart in control, to communicate his needs so that he feels supported by you, and for you guys to set up the way that you respond to him so that he can do all of those things, right? We think about cultivating the soil for your child, or the petri dish that you put your child in, and setting that up for him. So how do you see him responding to the world differently? In terms of how he views himself, in terms of how he communicates his needs. What's different for him now?
I would say one of the big ones is when you can see him pause for a minute and actually try and think of an answer. So we still get a lot of, well, what are you feeling? Nothings. I mean, that's the little thing that happens all the time. But there's a bunch of other times where you can see him internally doing the struggle and trying to figure out the words of, well, I'm feeling, frustrated, angry, upset, whatever it may be, that we could never put words to before. Yeah. But even can you do something for this? Can you do this for me right now? He'll pause for a minute and then say, no. It's not the immediate no. You can tell he thought about it for a minute. Yeah. Like, no, I really can't do this at the moment. Yeah. I need to sit, or he's come out and said, I need a minute to myself. And just the being able to express those kinds of things we never had it before.
That's awesome.
But that's made a world of difference in our ability. Then him giving that pause allows me to kind of come down from my escalation too. Say, okay, you need a minute, fine. I won't explode at the same time either. Take a minute, and then we'll do this again.
Love it.
Yes. I can say for me, it has also improved my ability to deal with John's highly sensitive traits because we've been together for a long time and I am not highly sensitive. So I never understood the need for him to walk away. I just want to deal with it, get through it, get over it, and move on. Yeah. And there have been countless times where he's just gone upstairs, whether he takes 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it might be. And then he comes back a completely different person. And I'm like, but I still want to deal with it. And so just recognizing it's not him walking away from me, it's him needing the time to process what was happening.
Yes.
And so being able to apply that to Rowan as well, there have been so many times where, he's dealing with whatever it might be, disappointment or frustration, and he just brings himself upstairs and, maybe 10, 15 minutes later, he comes back down and exactly like his dad, it's like it didn't even happen.
And notice that there's a big difference between processing an emotion and being able to move on so that it doesn't reverberate, right? It doesn't just vibrate through the whole day and you cut the tension through the knife even if it's over, compared to, okay, I'm over it. Big difference, right? Pretending that it's over and being legitimately over it.
Yep.
So, John, what is that like for you to know now that you are a model for your son in skillfully managing his emotions?
Difficult because I still don't do good with it. There's been times where, we go through whatever the meltdown issue, anything is, and then I feel like we can get to a true kind of heart to heart at the end of it, where he's like, "Yeah, no, I understand. You're right. I was mad about whatever," and then trying to explain, okay, I'm glad you understand that. Now here's why I was feeling this way,
Yeah.
and then that helps him kind of understand. Yeah, you're right. My trying to make you angry, I see why you would get angry. Okay. The fact that you can acknowledge the fact that you only said that just to get a rise out of me in this case, or you initially got upset because you fell and hurt yourself, but then when I asked you what was wrong, you didn't believe I was actually asking what was wrong. You thought I was criticizing you or any of those things. It gives the opportunity for me to try and model it. And like I said, It's difficult. I know I don't always do a good job with that by any stretch, but trying.
There's a difference between perfection and moving towards an outcome, right? Because parenting is never over. So it's you mentioned, and I asked you, what's that like? It doesn't mean that it's easy, right? But we can make it simple. We can break it down so that you know that you're making headway on the journey of parenting. And so comparatively from where you were, we're just up against each other, right? And now doesn't mean that it's not hard. Doesn't mean that you guys don't still have emotions that need to be processed and worked through and communicated and shifting, because you're two separate humans. And what I hear from you in that is that you're doing what you need to do as his dad in a way that is effective at having a conversation rather than just a yes sir or a whatever dad, and then later it just repeating itself over and over again, right? So the difference between a lecture and a conversation.
There's definitely times where it's, are you telling me this just to get me to shut up? Yep. Okay, thank you for being honest about that. Cool.
Right.
And then 5 minutes later, after he's had his calm down, he'll come back over and he's like, what did you want to talk about?
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely those kinds of things that are nice.
Yeah. Yeah. You could be blunt in yourself with your son and, and ask him outright, which in other words would be, do you need some time? Right? And he would probably say yes too, right? So there's a little, and so, but you guys are speaking the same language for the most part, in the sense that you're starting to read him and he's starting to give you feedback on how his brain is operating and how he's taking things in and getting his needs met. So I love that. I love hearing that you're moving in the direction of feeling more together rather than like you have to pull him along.
Yeah.
I really like that he has started to be able to quantify his feelings and use the feelings words and say, instead of I'm the worst kid ever, say I feel like the worst kid ever.
Yeah.
Or when I get mad, then it makes me sad, and being sad then makes me mad again. And so we've talked about okay, well, what are some things that instead of going around in circles, how can we get out of that? And we have things all over the house that are meant to do that. And it could be as simple as blowing up a balloon. Or, he can be so mad about whatever it might be, but if we start tossing a ball, it is something that can help him get out of that circle so that he can then realize oh, this is what made me mad. And that's where it started. And now I can deal with the fact that that made me mad and, how to go from here.
Right.
And we do a lot of at the end of the day, we talk about, what happened that day, where we struggled, and hopefully, not hopefully, we work on, how can we make it better tomorrow?
Yeah.
Because in the moment, which is what we used to do, like, what can we do right now to make it better?
Yeah.
And that doesn't work for him. He needs the time to process. He needs the time to, deal with it. And then we can talk about it and try and move on from there.
Right.
And stop using words like hopefully.
Right. I remember doing that in one of my first calls. You were like, it's not hope.
That's it. That's my trigger word. Hope is not a strategy. Boot camp's a strategy, right?
Yes.
And so, but that's the difference, right? That's the difference between throwing things at the wall to hope to see what sticks and following a system that works consistently and doing that repeatedly, right? I mean, when you want brownies, you need to follow the recipe. You can't just want brownies and have brownies show up, right? So it still takes work, right? So yeah, now that I know how brownies are made, I can just apparate brownies onto my counter. No, that's not how that works. You consistently make brownies. If you want brownies every day, bake brownies every day, right? And so that speaks to what you're speaking, what you mentioned earlier, John, is now that we know the recipe, we're working on perfecting it. We're working on making those brownies taste extra delicious. We're deciding what types of cocoa go in our recipe for our particular family. How do I throw in the flour? Do I do it like this or do I do it like that? Part of its personality, part of its flair. That's the capacity that you guys get to build in your household so that you're not robots and you're not expecting him to be in lockstep with you because he's his own human. And that's super crucial because it's the big difference between being able to watch your son act as his own person and just expecting him to be a little you and do whatever you say. Which is, as parents, we want that for our children, right? We want our children to be their own person and want to do better and be the best person they can be. So those are two different things that we want to, that's part of the objective as parents.
Yeah.
So for you, in terms of where you are now, is there anything that you big takeaways or things that you want other parents to understand if they're dealing with a daily meltdown cycle or multiple times a day cycle of meltdowns and aggravation and yelling? What do you want them to understand?
We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for progress. So I think I said earlier, we're not perfect. We still, have the outbursts or meltdowns or whatever. And I can honestly say I have them, right? I mean, there are times where I'm having a bad day and I just can't deal with whatever it is. Yeah. And it may not be as frequently, but I have to take, 5 minutes to myself in the corner or lock myself in the bathroom or whatever it might be. But prior to this, it was like, what's wrong with me for needing that time? It was, I'm the mom. I'm supposed to be able to deal with this. Yeah. And recognizing the progress is a huge thing. And recognizing the good things that are happening. We're so focused on the negatives. Yeah. And, the things that they're doing wrong or the things that they're not doing the way we want them to or anything like that. And, recognizing the good things that are happening throughout the day instead of just focusing on the negatives is definitely a great place to start.
For me, I would say it's that it obviously can get better and it doesn't take a lot to see improvement. Like we already talked about, just even in that first week, you can see that initial improvement and that was literally nothing. All it was acknowledging and validating. From the littlest amount of effort in the beginning, you can make improvements and then obviously build on the recipe, continue each week through the program. But the second part of that being it's not an immediate change. So it's little bits of progress over time. And it takes how many days to break a habit, how many days to build a habit. And this is a long-term strategy here to make this last, not a fix to just try and fix something.
Right.
But it doesn't take extreme effort. It's little bits and pieces, but just keep building little bits and pieces over time.
Awesome. So noticing that, being able to zoom out, take a big picture perspective that you're never going to stop parenting your kids. And it doesn't need to be this hard, right? When you have a system, when you have a strategy of slowing down yourself, then slowing down your child, being more playful, communicating their needs more effectively, setting up so that you're preventing the meltdowns, right? And then helping your child learn how to communicate differently, better, next time. Those components, over and over and over again, is how you get to where you are now and continue to grow. Because the objective is for you guys to raise children who are experiencing their emotions in a developmentally appropriate way, right? So just like adults feel feelings and get mad and frustrated, we're not expecting your 7-year-old, now 8-year-old, to never feel mad, to never raise his voice, right? To never stomp his foot when he's upset. That is a robot. And we don't raise robots, right? What we're doing is helping him feel like he's capable, like he can creatively solve his problems, that he is doing the best he can and he can do better. And alongside his twin sister. And that he's not, just because he's a different kid doesn't mean that he's wrong or there's something wrong with him. So I love that. All right, so for parents who are struggling with the daily meltdown cycle or multiple times a day, we recommend that you book a call with us, have a conversation with where you're stuck. We'll cover on that phone call whether or not we're a good fit to support you, and if that's the case, we'll tell you how that works. And if we feel like there's something that's more efficient or effective, then we'll steer you in that direction. Because for the parents who need this level of support, we walk you through what that looks like, and then you get to make that decision on your own, as we already hear Jamie and John did that, despite their skepticism, or despite John's skepticism. That has to be your choice, right? Last anythings before we wrap up today?
Just go for it. Book the call.
Yeah.
Don't wait the months that we did to book the call. Book the call and find out if it's going to be the right thing for you. Because I wish we'd done it sooner.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate you guys, and just happy to serve you and see continuously how you grow. All right.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.